As I begin to prepare my winter forecast each year, my main goal is to always identify what is going to drive the upcoming winter. Now, you may be asking yourself, why would even attempt to put out a winter forecast? Some say that seasonal forecasts are pointless and inaccurate. But putting out a winter forecast allows me to take all of the research that I've done so far on the upcoming winter and put it all together in a way that gives me a pretty good idea of what will likely take place this winter. I share this information with you so you can prepare. That is, if I've done an accurate job of reading the available data. So I'm going to explain all the things I am pretty sure are certain, along with the things I'm not sure about. So here we go. One thing that is certain to affect the winter in our region is the warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. These waters will generally provide an abundant source of moisture for storm systems affecting our area. NOAA scientists have tracked a steady climb in ocean temperatures since back in April of 2023, and that's causing unprecedented heat stress conditions in the Caribbean basin, including waters surrounding Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. By late summer, this marine heat wave pushed Gulf temperatures well into the 80s in most places. The waters around the Gulf Coast were even warmer in the 90s. In fact, a buoy off the coast of Florida measured a water temperature of 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Another thing I'm certain of is the global effects on our atmosphere caused by the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption in the Pacific on January 15th of 2022. The underwater eruption in the South Pacific Ocean also blasted an enormous plume of water vapor into the Earth's stratosphere. NASA scientists say the vapor will stay there for years, likely affecting the Earth's climate patterns. The big blast sent ash, gases, and vapors as high as 35 miles into the atmosphere, a record in the satellite era. It normally takes around 2 to 3 years for sulfate aerosols from normal volcanoes to fall out of the atmosphere. But the huge amount of water from the January 15th eruption could take 5 to 10 years to fully dissipate. The January 15th eruption drastically disrupted annual water patterns in the stratosphere. The Earth has not seen anything like this in modern times. Even NASA agrees that our weather patterns have been altered, and altered a lot. Now, we cannot talk about winter without mentioning the polar vortex. If you've followed my weather over the years, you're already familiar with its effects on our winter. The polar vortex reemerges every fall and plays a key role in our weather. It contains some of the coldest air in the northern hemisphere. Winds are important when describing the polar vortex, as they are usually the first to show that something is changing. Its winds usually form a boundary that keeps the cold air contained and prevents us from freezing. The problem, though, is that once in a while the polar vortex wall of wind breaks down a little. The colder Arctic air is harder to contain, which can now escape from the polar region into the United States and/or Europe. The result is a big, powerful blast of Arctic air that can travel far to the south, causing the temperature to plunge in places accustomed to having mild winters. With the stratosphere warmer this year due to the large amount of water vapor, thanks in part to the Hunga Tonga volcano, that will lead to a weakening of the wall of wind which holds the polar vortex in place, and that in turn could send waves of cold air into areas of the U.S. between the Rockies and the Appalachians. As I write this, a new polar vortex is forming in the stratosphere over the North Pole, and it is strengthening rapidly as we move headlong towards winter. Another certainty is the thing called quasi-biennial oscillation, or QBO. The QBO is a regular variation of the winds high above the equator. Strong winds in the stratosphere travel in a belt around the planet, and every 14 months, these winds completely change directions. This means that winds high above the equator change from west to east every year or so. A radiosonde analysis from Singapore also shows the wind direction above the tropical regions. It confirms the east QBO phase is descending in the stratosphere and will be dominant this winter. The QBO is an important part of weather development in winter, as it can affect the polar vortex and the jet stream. When the QBO is negative or easterly, as it is now, there is an increased chance of a weaker jet stream, sudden stratospheric warming events, and colder winters in the United States, Canada, and Europe. The polar vortex is one of the ways that the QBO can help to shape the winter weather patterns. Finally, for the first time in 7 years, El Nino conditions have developed in the Pacific, prompting some experts to urge that preparations for extreme weather events will be necessary to protect lives and safeguard livelihoods. El Nino conditions are declared when sea temperatures in the tropical eastern Pacific rise half a degree above the long-term average. This occurs on average every 2 to 7 years in bouts that last between 9 and 12 months. This El Nino is called a Mordecai El Nino and is different from a traditional El Nino because it is located largely in the central equatorial Pacific region instead of in the eastern equatorial Pacific region. I won't go into all the scientific details, but a Mordecai El Nino tends to bring our part of the country above normal precipitation. The winter of 2009 to 10 was also a Mordecai El Nino. You may remember that as the year of the great ice storm in our region that left many areas crippled. Things are different this year, and the chances of another major ice storm seem diminished thanks to the larger influx of colder air this year. But it is something to watch as the winter progresses into January 2024. The El Nino event is one of the most important factors for the upcoming winter season. Now that we are in the month of October, the fall chill has begun with a reinforcing shot of cool air for our first October weekend, with highs only reaching the upper 50s to low 60s across this part of Kentucky. Some areas could see the first scattered frost of the season. It may warm a bit before another fairly strong storm arrives around the 12th that brings good rain chances, possibly a few severe storms, and winds that will chill things down even more by the weekend of the 14th. There may be more scattered frost in some areas after that storm moves out and the colder air arrives. Another fall-type storm arrives around the 18th and 19th with gusty winds and steady rains. Then things get a little tranquil in the days leading up to Halloween with highs in the upper 50s and chilly nights. The quiet weather from Halloween will continue into November as we get our best viewing of the fall colors with highs in the 50s and low 60s. But there are rumblings of other things going on that will eventually affect our late fall and even the winter outlook. Looking further ahead to late fall and beginning of winter, I expect a significant change in the pattern which would result in a winter that is rather different from the mild winter we saw last year across much of the country. That mild period of weather looks like a good possibility for the first week of November, but things become unsettled with a big rainmaker around the 5th and the 6th. This will bring much cooler air in with highs in the low 50s and lows in the low to mid 30s, giving us our first hard frost. Then another storm system arrives by the 10th and continues with dreary, cool weather all the way through the 16th. We finally get a break in the week leading up to Thanksgiving. Currently, I expect Thanksgiving Day and Black Friday to be sunny but chilly in our part of the region. But December is looking quite volatile and stormy with windy conditions and more frequent cold air intrusions across a much larger region of the central and eastern U.S. It currently looks to me like mid-December would be the most likely time of this winter-like pattern change as the polar vortex starts to inject itself into the pattern. Look for a winter-type storm with wind, rain, sleet, and snow becoming all snow by evening. So going out on a limb for fun, I expect our first snow on the 14th. Give or take a day or two. From there on, the cold becomes more intense with frequent visits from the polar vortex and, yes, more snowfall. However, the trends are that we probably won't see a white Christmas, but a day or two afterwards looks a little on the snowy side. Looking at snowfall in general, the models seem to indicate above average snowfall over much of the eastern United States and Europe. This is an expected response seen after major stratospheric warming events. The colder air has an easier path towards the south, creating better snowfall opportunities. So, in a nutshell, look for much colder second half of fall and a very cold and snowy winter, based on what I have mentioned as the reasons. It will likely be a winter to remember. This will take us through the first of the year. I will post a full winter outlook around the 1st of November. Until then, enjoy the beauty of this world around us.